My name is Clara Hayes, and I am 32 years old. For the past 10 minutes, I have been standing perfectly still in the entryway of my own home, a place I've come to know as a sanctuary. The scent of sea salt and damp cedar, usually a comfort, now feels sharp and foreign in my lungs. After a decade of profound, unbroken silence, my parents have just stepped across my threshold. Their face is a mixture of weary travel and condescending appraisal of a vacation rental. They believe this house, Tideview, is a temporary escape for a family reunion I was, naturally, not invited to. The sound of my mother's expensive leather tote hitting the polished floorboards was like a gunshot in the quiet hall. Her carefully constructed mask of serene composure, a look I've seen hold steady through society galas and business crises, finally fractured. But it was the expression on my father's face that I will carry with me forever. The slow dawning, the flicker of disbelief followed by a wave of something unreadable, shock, perhaps, or even a flicker of shame, as his gaze met mine and he understood. He was not a guest in a stranger's house. He was an intruder in his daughter's life. The last time I saw them, I was 22, a girl with a fierce, fragile hope, driving away from our sprawling Sonoma estate with little more than a used car, a box of camera equipment, and $1,200 to my name. Their final words to me were not of love or worry, but of erasure. They were disowning a dreamer who refused to follow their blueprint. Today, as they stand before me, two ghosts from a past I thought I had outrun, I don't raise my voice. I don't need to. The life I have built around me, this house, this quiet strength, it speaks for itself. Growing up a Hayes in the heart of California's wine country was to be cultivated, much like the grapevines that marched in perfect, disciplined rows across our family's land. Our lives were not for spontaneous joy, but for presentation. My father, Arthur Hayes, was a man carved from ambition and earth, a titan in the world of boutique wineries who valued legacy and control above all else. My mother, Genevieve, was his perfect partner, a woman of inherited grace and social steel, who curated our family's image with the same meticulous care she gave her renowned rose gardens. My older sister, Annalise, was the prized bloom. Brilliant and driven, she followed the path laid out for her with unwavering precision, a pre-med track at Stanford, followed by medical school at Johns Hopkins, and a prestigious residency in cardiology. My younger brother, Leo, secured his place in the dynasty by marrying the daughter of a Silicon Valley magnate, a union that was more a merger of assets than a meeting of hearts. He was charming, handsome, and content to live within the comfortable confines of our father's world. And then there was me, the wildflower growing in the wrong place. From the age of 8, a cheap film camera, a gift from my grandmother, was a permanent extension of my hand. I wasn't interested in the grand vistas of the vineyards that tourists came to see. I was drawn to the details they overlooked, the way the afternoon sun, thick and golden like honey, filtered through the oak leaves, the gnarled, work-worn hands of our vineyard manager, Mr. Soto, the fleeting expression on my mother's face in an unguarded moment. A flicker of something real beneath the polish. "It's a lovely hobby, Clara," my mother would say, her voice gentle but firm, as she'd find me developing film in a makeshift darkroom I'd created in a dusty corner of the wine cellar. But it's not a path. A Hayes woman builds a life of substance. Substance, in their lexicon, meant practicality and profit. "You have a mind for logistics," my father would insist over dinners that felt more like board meetings. "You see patterns. That's a gift for business, for marketing. Our brand needs that." They saw my artist's eye not as a way of seeing the world, but as a tool to be repurposed for the family enterprise. I tried to compromise. I enrolled in the marketing program at UC Berkeley, a respectable choice that placated them. For 4 years, I lived a fractured existence. By day, I was the diligent business student, learning about brand strategy and market demographics. But in the evenings and on weekends, I would escape to the university's arts campus, losing myself in the quiet magic of the darkroom, the scent of developing chemicals a kind of incense. I was learning the language of light and shadow, a language that felt more like my native tongue than the corporate jargon of my textbooks. My heart was in the stolen hours, in the world I could frame and capture. My graduation day felt like a precipice. We were celebrating at Aurelia, a hushed, Michelin-starred restaurant in San Francisco where the city lights glittered like scattered jewels below. I clutched the acceptance letter in my purse like a talisman. It was from a highly selective arts mentorship in Portland, a year-long program with a photographer whose work on architectural atmosphere had captivated me. I had a job offer, too, one my father had arranged at a top-tier marketing firm. I thought possessing both would give me leverage, proof that I wasn't running from responsibility, but toward a different kind of life. After the main course, as the waiter cleared the plates, I took a deep breath. "I've decided to pursue photography full-time," I announced, my voice trembling only slightly. "I've been accepted into a mentorship program in Oregon." The silence that fell over the table was heavier than any I had ever known. My father set his fork down with deliberate precision. My mother's polite smile became a mask of ice. "Don't be absurd, Clara," my father said, his voice low and controlled. "You start at Sterling Cooper next month. The arrangements have been made." "I'm not taking the job," I said, looking at him directly for the first time. "I've already told them no." What came next was not a shouting match, but a calm, methodical execution of my dream. My parents, in the cool, measured tones they used for difficult business negotiations, laid out the foolishness of my choice. Photography was a pursuit for the aimless, not for a haze. It was financially precarious, a life of struggle and uncertainty. They spoke of wasted potential, of tarnishing the family name. "If you walk this path," my father concluded, his eyes cold and final, "you walk it alone. We will not fund a fantasy. We have invested too much in your future to see you throw it away on a whim." "You'll come to your senses," my mother added, a statement of fact, not of hope. "You'll realize we were right." But I didn't. 2 days later, my old sedan was packed with my few belongings, clothes, books, and every piece of camera gear I owned. My bank account held what was left of my graduation gift money, $1,250. It felt like a fortune and nothing at all. Annalise found me in the driveway, her expression a mixture of pity and frustration. "They'll come around," she offered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Just give it time." Leo never came to say goodbye. The first years in Portland were a baptism by rain and reality. I found a tiny room in a shared house in a perpetually damp neighborhood, the air thick with the smell of coffee and wet leaves. My life shrank to a cycle of survival. Days were spent frothing milk as a barista, my hands perpetually smelling of burnt espresso. Evenings were a blur of waiting tables at a noisy bistro, balancing plates while my feet ached. The nights and weekends, however, were mine. They were sacred. In those precious hours, I roamed the city with my camera, building my portfolio one frame at a time. I photographed the elegant decay of old industrial buildings, the way the mist softened the edges of the Fremont Bridge, the quiet solitude of a stranger reading on a park bench. I shot headshots for aspiring actors and documented backyard weddings for friends who paid me in pizza and gratitude. That first Christmas, I sat in my cold room and dialed my parents' number. It rang and rang until the line went dead. No answer. I tried on New Year's on my birthday. The silence from their end was an active thing, a wall they were consciously building between us. The tenuous thread to my old life frayed and then snapped. Annalise's occasional texts, "Happy birthday, Clara," became less frequent, then stopped altogether. I learned from a distant cousin's social media post that Leo had gotten married. I saw the professionally shot photos of my entire family, beaming in the Sonoma sun. I hadn't known. Later, I learned I had a nephew through the same cold, digital window. The deepest cut came when my grandmother, the one who had given me my first camera, passed away. I read her obituary online. My name was not listed among the surviving grandchildren. It was not just an absence of communication, it was a methodical erasure. I had ceased to exist. My break didn't come from a single, dramatic moment, but from a slow, steady burn of persistence. I had a small collection of my Portland cityscapes displayed at a local coffee shop. One rainy afternoon, a man named Marcus, the owner of a small, respected art gallery, stood staring at my work for a long time. He was gruff, with a cynical eye, but he saw something. "You have a good eye for structure, for mood," he grunted, buying me a coffee. "But nobody buys photos of sad-looking bridges. The money, kid, is in spaces people want to own. Beautiful homes, unique architecture. People will always need to sell beautiful things." He gave me a small job, photographing a local ceramicist's studio for a magazine feature. The pay was a meager $200, but I treated it like a commission for a museum. I spent hours studying the light, the way it fell across the clay and the potter's wheel. The artist was thrilled. She recommended me to a friend, a boutique architect. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to build a reputation. I wasn't just taking pictures of rooms, I was capturing their soul, their atmosphere. My real turning point was a commission to photograph a stunning, minimalist cabin nestled in the Oregon woods. The owner was Isabel Rossi, a reclusive and brilliant artist in her late 70s who had built a formidable career on her own terms. She watched me work all day, a silent, assessing presence. "You don't just photograph a building," she said to me that evening, as we shared a pot of tea on her deck overlooking the forest. "You photograph its silence. You find the poetry in the geometry." Isabel became my mentor and, unexpectedly, my friend. She saw the artist in me that my family had refused to acknowledge. She hired me to document all her properties, a sun-drenched desert home in New Mexico, a sleek city loft in Seattle, for a personal collection. Her favorite was Tideview, a magnificent house of cedar and glass perched on a rugged cliff on the Oregon coast. "My children find it too isolated," she once confided, as we walked along the windswept beach below. "They don't understand the beauty of a storm. They only see the inconvenience." When Isabel was diagnosed with a fast-moving cancer, the news was a physical blow. She passed away 6 months later. I stood at the back of her memorial, a stranger among her children and society friends, none of whom knew the bond we'd shared. A week later, her lawyer called. I expected a small memento, perhaps one of her cameras. Instead, he slid a deed across his polished desk. Tideview. She had left it to me, along with a trust to cover its maintenance for a decade. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, my voice choked. "No mistake," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. Isabel's letter was short, her handwriting a familiar, elegant script. "Clara," it read, "this house needs a guardian who understands its spirit. You see the beauty the world overlooks. I built my life by turning my vision into a legacy. Now, it's your turn. Make this place your own, but more importantly, let it be the foundation from which you build." Tideview became my world. The constant roar of the ocean was a soothing balm to the old, quiet wounds. I converted the separate guest house into a state-of-the-art studio and launched my own business, Luminance Studios. I specialized in atmospheric architectural and interior photography, a niche that allowed me to combine my technical skill with my artistic soul. My reputation grew. I hired a small, dedicated team. My client list expanded from local architects to national design magazines and high-end property developers. By the time I was 30, I had a life that the 22-year-old girl driving away from Sonoma could never have imagined. I was creatively fulfilled, financially independent, and surrounded by a chosen family of friends and colleagues who valued me for who I was, not who I was supposed to be. Yet, some nights, when a storm raged outside and the house felt vast and empty, the ghosts of my past would return. I'd pull out the small, worn box of old family photos I'd managed to keep. There we were, the 5 of us on a ski trip, my father's arm around me, a laughing group shot at Annalise's graduation. They were relics from another life, a life where I had belonged. Success had built a fortress around my heart, but it hadn't filled the empty space my family had left behind. The notification on my phone was jarring. My brother, Leo, had posted a photo. I rarely looked at his feed. The curated perfection of his life was a painful reminder of my exile. But this time I tapped. The image showed my parents on a beach, the dramatic sea stacks and misty coastline achingly familiar. It was my beach. The beach below Tideview. Leo's caption read, "So excited for a quiet family retreat to the coast next month to celebrate Mom and Dad's 45th anniversary. A well-deserved break for the best parents in the world." My blood ran cold. A few clicks confirmed my fears. They had booked my home through Coastal Escapes, a luxury rental agency. I used to manage the property when I was traveling for work. The bookings were anonymous, a veil of privacy for high-profile clients. They had no idea it was mine. My first impulse was a flash of hot, white anger. I called my property manager, Sarah. "Cancel it," I said, my voice tight. "Clara, I can't," she said gently. "They're fully paid. It's a non-refundable booking. To cancel now without cause, we could face a lawsuit, or at the very least, a PR nightmare for your brand." "The cause," I said, my voice dropping, "is that they are the family who disowned me a decade ago." Sarah was silent for a long moment. "That is a cause," she finally conceded. "But a complicated one. Let me look into the legalities." "But Clara, think about it. Do you want that fight?" For days, I was torn. I could leave. I could take a pre-planned work trip to Japan and let them have their reunion in blissful ignorance. It would be the path of least resistance, the one I had been trained to take. Then, I saw my mother's post on her Facebook page, a rare update, looking forward to a simple, humble week at the coast with our nearest and dearest. In this busy world, it's so important to focus on what truly matters. Humble. The word ignited something in me. This humble retreat was costing them over $10,000 for the week. And what truly matters was a circle drawn with me explicitly outside of it. My decision solidified. I would not run. I would not hide. This was my home, my life, built not on their foundation, but on the bedrock of my own resilience. For once, I would not be the one to disappear. The day of their arrival, I watched them from the security cameras I'd had installed for when the house was rented. It felt voyeuristic, a strange haunting of my own space. My father was the first to enter, his posture critical, running a hand along the reclaimed Douglas fir beams as if testing their integrity. My mother followed, immediately directing the placement of their luggage, her eyes scanning the open-plan living room for flaws. Then came Annalise with her husband and 2 children I'd never met. Leo arrived last with his wife and their son. Aunts, uncles, and cousins followed, filling my quiet sanctuary with the loud, confident chatter of the Hayes clan. I watched my mother subtly rearrange a vase of wildflowers I'd placed on the mantel. I watched my father study a large, abstract photograph I had taken of the Oregon mist, his expression unreadable. The most painful moment came when my mother began arranging framed family portraits on the console table. A history in silver frames from which I had been meticulously edited. She picked up one of the few older photos that included me, a family portrait at Lake Tahoe, and, after a moment's hesitation, tucked it behind a larger, more recent one of Annalise's perfect family. The message was as clear as the glass she moved it behind. I was a detail to be obscured. That evening, I listened to their dinner conversation through the audio feed, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. They spoke of a downturn in the European wine market, of Annalise being considered for chief of staff at her hospital. My name was a void, an unspoken, unacknowledged absence. Until my young cousin, Maya, spoke up. "Whatever happened to Clara?" she asked, her teenage voice cutting through the polite murmur. I remember she took the most amazing picture of me and Grandma once. An immediate, tense silence fell. "That's not a topic for the dinner table," Maya, my Aunt Carol, her mother, said sharply. "But why?" Maya pressed. She was always so nice. Your cousin chose a different path. My father's voice was clipped, final. It's not something we discuss. I switched off the monitor, my hands trembling. A different path. A choice made. A closed subject. I walked out onto my deck, the cold night air a shock to my system. The lights from my house, blazed against the darkness, reflecting on the churning sea below. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, I will step out of the shadows. I chose my outfit with the care of a general preparing for battle, a simple, elegant cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark trousers. My hair was pulled back. I was calm, centered, and in control. I waited until I knew they would be gathered on the main deck for a late brunch, the sound of their laughter drifting through the open doors. The clack of my boots on the stone floor of the hallway was the only announcement I needed. Every conversation stuttered to a halt. A dozen pairs of eyes swiveled to face me. I saw confusion, then dawning recognition. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a delicate wine glass slipping from her other hand to shatter on the flagstones. My father stood up halfway, his face paling, a look of profound disbelief washing over him. Clara, Annalise breathed, her voice barely a whisper. I offered a small, calm smile, the kind I used to reassure anxious clients. Hello, everyone, I said, my voice even. I hope you're enjoying your stay. Leo's wife, a woman I'd never met, found her voice first. What are you doing here? How did you get in? I let my gaze travel over the stunned faces of my family before answering. I let myself in, I said simply. This is my house. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the cry of a distant gull and the crashing of waves on the shore below. The children, sensing the seismic shift in the adult atmosphere, fell silent, staring at me with wide, curious eyes. That's not possible, my father finally managed, his voice raspy. We rented this place through Coastal Escapes. You did, I confirmed, stepping further onto the deck and claiming the space as my own. They managed Tideview for me when I'm away. I decided to cancel my trip. My mother sank into a chair, her face a mask of confusion. You own this. The question was a vessel freighted with a decade of unasked questions. How? With what money? Without us? Before I could formulate an answer, a figure broke from the frozen tableau. It was Maya. She rushed to me, throwing her arms around my waist in a fierce, unhesitating hug. I knew it was you, she whispered into my sweater. I told them your pictures were all over the rental site, but they didn't listen. Her genuine warmth was a crack in my armor. I hugged her back, my throat tightening with an emotion I hadn't expected. Look at you, I said, holding her at arm's length. You're not a little girl anymore. She beamed, her artist's eyes, so much like my own, shining with a light of recognition that I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Maya's embrace seemed to break the spell. A few aunts and uncles approached cautiously, offering hesitant greetings. Annalise came forward, her hug stiff and brief. You look, well, Clara, she said, her voice thick with a complicated mix of guilt and surprise. Leo hung back, standing beside his wife, a silent, conflicted observer. My parents remained seated, statues carved from shock and disbelief. Please, don't let me interrupt your meal, I said to the group at large. Join us, Clara. My aunt, Maya's mother, offered quickly, gesturing to an empty chair. I saw my own mother flinch, a barely perceptible tightening of her jaw at the invitation. For a heartbeat, I considered retreating to my studio, leaving them to grapple with my reappearance. But I held my ground. This was my home. I would not make myself small in it. Thank you, I said, taking the seat. I would like that. The brunch that followed was a masterclass in strained civility. The conversation was a carefully navigated minefield of neutral topics: the unseasonable sunshine, the quality of the local seafood, the breathtaking views from the deck. Compliments about the house were offered, tinged with a new, awkward curiosity. No one looked me directly in the eye, except for Maya, who asked me a stream of questions about my work until her mother shot her a warning look. It's all right, I said, meeting my aunt's gaze. Photography is my profession. I'm happy to talk about it. Luminance Studios specializes in architectural and lifestyle imagery. So that's how you manage this? My father interjected, his voice regaining its familiar, authoritative tone. The unspoken addendum hung in the air. A hobby couldn't possibly pay for this. My business has been successful. Yes, I answered, my tone level. But this house, this was a gift. It was left to me by a mentor, a woman who believed in my vision when others did not. The subtle barb hit its mark. My mother looked down at her plate. My father's jaw tightened. How fortunate, he clipped out. Yes, I said, letting the word hang in the air. It was. The rest of the day unfolded in a series of these carefully measured encounters. I felt like a diplomat in a foreign land that was, paradoxically, my own. I laid out the boundaries of the house. My studio and private wing were off limits, but they were welcome to the rest. I answered their questions politely but offered nothing more. I was a gracious host and a complete stranger. As dusk began to bleed purple and rose across the sky, I stood alone on the deck, watching the sea grow dark. I heard footsteps behind me. It was my father. The photography on your company's website, he began, not looking at me but out at the horizon. The Moreau Winery project in Napa. The interiors for the St. Regis residences. That was your work. I was stunned into silence for a moment. He had been looking. Yes, I finally said. He nodded slowly. It's exceptional work. The word exceptional sounded foreign in his mouth, as if it cost him a great deal to say it. Before I could respond, he turned and walked back inside, leaving me with the ghost of a compliment and a profound sense of dislocation. Late that night, I found Annalise in the kitchen, staring into a cup of tea. The house was finally quiet. Can't sleep? I asked softly. She shook her head. Too much to process. She gestured to the chair opposite her. Sit with me. I did. In the dim light, my older sister looked weary. The confident doctor had fine lines of stress around her eyes. They told everyone you went traveling, she said abruptly, not meeting my gaze. An extended trip to find yourself. It was easier than admitting you'd defied them. When you didn't come back, tail between your legs, the story just faded. You became a closed topic. And you went along with it, I stated, a quiet ache in my chest. It was easier, she whispered, the words a familiar, painful refrain. For the family image. For keeping the peace with Dad. She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a decade of unspoken regret. I'm sorry, Clara. It was cowardly. She took a deep breath. This reunion, it's not about their anniversary. Not really, she told me then. My father's business, the Venerable Hayes Vineyards, was in trouble. A series of bad harvests, coupled with changing market tastes, had left them deeply in debt. They had taken a second mortgage on the Sonoma estate. This trip, this expensive performance of family unity, was a facade. And there's more, she said, her voice dropping. Dad's health. He has a heart condition, one he's been hiding. He collapsed at the winery last month. The image of my invincible father collapsing was impossible to conjure. The door swung open and Leo stood there. He saw us, hesitated, and then slumped into the third chair. The Hayes children, reunited in a late-night kitchen council. Your life, Leo said, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, a raw, undisguised envy. You built it yourself. From scratch. Do you have any idea how lucky you are? Before I could answer, he confessed the truth of his own life, a hollow marriage to a woman he barely knew, a life of luxurious obligation, his every move still dictated by our father's approval and his father-in-law's money. I followed the plan, he said bitterly. And I'm trapped. The sound of my mother's silk robe rustling in the hall preceded her entrance. The confessions ceased instantly. Such a late gathering, she observed, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. We were just heading to bed, Annalise said, standing abruptly. Leo followed. I was left alone with my mother. She sat in the chair Annalise had vacated, her posture ramrod straight. This is a magnificent home, Clara, she said. You've done very well. I have, I agreed. We thought we were protecting you, she said, her gaze distant. From failure. From struggle. And instead, you protected yourselves from my choices. She flinched. Perhaps. Pride is a powerful force. She stood, her composure fully restored. Your father, his health is a concern. He doesn't listen. For the first time, I heard a crack in her voice, a note of genuine fear. She was terrified. The empire was faltering, and its queen was afraid. In that moment, any lingering desire for vindication evaporated, replaced by a complex, sorrowful understanding. They were not the giants of my memory. They were just people, flawed and frightened, their carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. The next morning, I was on the beach before dawn, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the sky shift from inky black to a soft, pearly gray. The ocean was calm, its steady rhythm a counterpoint to the turmoil in my heart. The confrontation had happened, but instead of resolution, I felt a strange emptiness. The anger that had fueled me for so long had burned out, leaving me adrift. I heard the crunch of boots on the wet sand and turned to see my father approaching. He looked smaller in the vastness of the morning, older. He gestured to the driftwood log I was sitting on. May I? I nodded. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun rise, painting the clouds in strokes of pink and gold. I've never been good at admitting I was wrong, he said finally, his voice rough. When you left, I was sure you would fail. I told myself it was for your own good, that you'd be back in a year, ready to listen. I almost did fail, I confessed quietly. It was harder than you can imagine. But you didn't. He finally turned to look at me, and in his eyes, I saw not just surprise, but a grudging respect. What you've built, it's more solid than anything I imagined for you. He paused. The irony, I suppose, is that you found the security I always wanted for you by completely ignoring my advice. It was the closest he would ever come to an apology. I'm not coming back, Dad, I said gently but firmly. Not to the way things were. I know, he said, his gaze returning to the sea. But maybe there's a new way forward. As if on cue, Maya appeared further down the beach, her own camera in hand, lost in the act of capturing the morning light. She reminds me of you, my father murmured. Always seeing the world differently. He watched her for a moment. Her parents want her to go into finance. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. What do you think she should do? What do you think? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. I think, he said slowly, I've learned what happens when you try to cage a wild bird. And I've seen what happens when you let one fly. That evening, I gathered them in the living room. I laid out my terms, not for a reunion, but for a new beginning. I'm not asking us to forget the past, I said. I'm asking us to be honest about it. And to build something new, based on mutual respect, not on obligation. I offered small steps, occasional phone calls, an open door, a relationship based on who we were now, not who we used to be. I offered to mentor Maya, to help her cultivate her talent. One by one, they agreed. It was not a joyous celebration, but a quiet, somber treaty. The morning of their departure was a series of small, tentative gestures. Annalise gave me a real hug this time. I'll call, she promised, and I believed her. Leo shook my hand. Thank you, Clara, he said, his eyes conveying more than his words. My mother touched my arm, her touch surprisingly gentle. We'll talk soon, she said. My father stood before me, clearing his throat. I am proud of you, Clara, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have said it a long, long time ago. After the last car pulled away, I walked through my house. It was quiet again, but the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of absence, but of peace. The ghosts had been confronted, and in their place were real, flawed people with whom I might, over time, forge a new kind of family. Months later, I hosted a Thanksgiving at Tideview. I invited my parents, my siblings, and my cousins. But I also invited my chosen family, the friends from Portland who had been my bedrock, my team from the studio, Marcus, the gallery owner, even Isabel's son, with whom I'd formed a tentative friendship. Not everyone came, but the house was full of laughter and conversation, a messy, beautiful, authentic blend of past and present. As I looked around the long dining table that evening, watching my father in a quiet conversation with one of my friends, and my mother showing Maya a feature on my camera, I realized I had done more than just build a career. I had built a life large enough to hold all of it, the pain and the forgiveness, the old wounds and the new connections. Later, I walked on the beach under a sky full of cold, bright stars. 10 years ago, I had left a home defined by rigid expectations. Today, I stood in the doorway of a home I had created, one defined by acceptance and respect, most importantly, my own. I hadn't gotten my old family back. I had found something far more valuable, the strength to redefine what family meant, on my own terms. The journey hadn't been about proving them wrong. It had been about proving to myself that I could build a life that was truly my own, and in doing so, create a space where genuine connection, in all its imperfect forms, could finally begin to grow.